Hello, everybody. Hello. If it's Wednesday, you know where I am. Except for that one time last month. No, just kidding. I'm Dr. Twanna Carter, and I am a career coach, and I help busy women executives struggling with self-criticism, self-imposter, and imposter syndrome, rather, stress and anxiety, and I help them by helping to overcome, right, all of that so they can feel comfortable in their own skins and learn to enjoy the careers and the lives that they worked so hard to build. So if you can hear me, go ahead and drop a one in the comments. And if I have someone from Southern United States in the house today, drop South in the comments. If you're kind of in the North and the East Coast, drop North or East Coast in the comments. If you're from the Midwest, drop Midwest in the comments. If you're from the West Coast, drop West Coast in the comments. Now, for those of you, there may be some of you late owls over in Europe. I know most of you are probably asleep by now. It's like two something in the morning. But if you happen to be on here or you catch the replay, you too can drop the country where you are, right? So welcome, welcome, welcome. Today I am talking about the 10 tips for dealing with toxic employees. I know I do talk about a lot about dealing with toxic coworkers, and I have, the 21 telltale signs of dealing with a toxic coworker. Um, and I can drop that out in the comments for you that want to check out that video. But tonight is all about dealing with toxic employees, right? Whew, I remember I'm sitting here thinking back. I was this brand new second lieutenant, had my little shiny gold bars. I went into the army as a brand new second lieutenant, and when I got there, I had about 8 specialists that were recently promoted to sergeants. So they went, to like a first line supervisor. So all they were hanging out with all their buddies, and then with the stroke of a pen, they were all now first line supervisors. And there was issues with leadership. There was issues with, you know, like, I don't care if you have this rank. I don't want to hear that. We hung out and got drunk last week. And I had issues. I had issues in the ranks, right? And it was something to deal with, because when you talk about dealing with toxic employees, there are numerous things that makes them toxic or that can happen. Lots of different ways that you can go when you're talking about dealing with those employees, right? And so I think within the first couple of months, I know one of my employees told me, I had all men, I was in the Army, engineer lieutenant, and he just flat out told me, I don't care who you are, I don't care what you do, I don't believe women should be in leadership positions, period. So, you know, yeah, that told me something about dealing with that employee. But I was like, we're gonna make the world a better place. This is gonna work, and this is gonna. Yeah, that was the first employee I had to punish. That was the first employee I had to. That was the first one that I gave this big spiel about, their NCOs. Now you have to respect them. They have this position, yada, yada, yada. Because again, I had my shiny gold bars. It's like, yes, yes, I got this. And I gave this long spiel about respect and all of that good stuff, right? And I mean, like 10, 30 seconds of me giving that big spiel, he cursed one of my NCOs out in front of me, in front of my platoon, and in front of all the platoons in the motor pool that day. Yeah, that's right. It was like my first 1 or 2 months in a leadership position. So, you know, it comes at you fast. it comes at you real fast. It comes zooming at you. So that's why I'm actually doing this live today about managing toxic employees, because out of the gate, brand new, it's sometimes terrifying to know what to do first. It really can't be, right? And so I'm just here to give some hints for folks who are brand new, for folks who've been there for a minute, but you've walked into this position and you're like, what in the freak did I get myself into? All right. So the thing is, toxic employees are everywhere, right? They can be a part of any workplace. I won't say every workplace because some workplaces are blessed not to have them, right? But you can't prevent them from coming, to your place of employment, especially if they were already there when you got there, right? But you can do things once you get there and you figure out who they are and what they're doing. There are steps that you can take. Okay. Number one, because I want to get right to it. Number one, set your goals and your standards and your policies. And actually, I did that. I was like, nope, these are now brand new NCOs. You must respect them. It doesn't matter if they only got 3 months in time and grade. It doesn't matter. You respect them. So you do want to set your goals and your standards, right? And I'll tell you the reason why that's important a little bit later. And you want to be sure, they're measurable, they're achievable, everybody understands them, right? They're fair. That way, when you have someone that is toxic or they're like just totally being insolent, insubordinate, and they're disobeying those rules, you have somewhere to start. You can start, what you make clear. Okay. So it's very important that there's no confusion around what are the expectations because you set them, right? And if you are managing several leaders, direct reports under you, be sure that you let them know what your standards are so that they can also toe the line there. This just is very important that everybody gets on the same sheet of music so that if you have a toxic employees, it's a heck of a lot easier. I won't say easier, but it's a little bit more straightforward if everybody is operating from the same sheet of music versus something over here and something different over here and something different there, something different there, because then the employee has a chance to say discrimination because that person did it. They're this is this. You're only picking on me, and you're discriminating against me. So you want to be sure everybody, the expectations are clear. All the managers know them. All the first line supervisors know them. Second line supervisors know them. The mid level supervisor. Everybody knows those mid level managers, right? Because again, there's nothing worse than one section is like, this is business as usual. And then the next session is like, yeah, we're writing him up because he's did XYZ. Heads are about to roll because an employee did this, but you look over here and every employee gets to do that. It's very difficult to start trying to lay down the law and change policies at that point because then you got all these different things going on, right? And if you walk into a place where there's like no policies, no standards, then you need to create. That's your opportunity to create. Get with your all of your leaders, your managers, depending on what level you are, or if you're first level, then it's a chance to create and go through and get management buy-off and say, hey, I think we should do XYZ. That'll be a nice feather in your cap. Or if you are at the top, it's time to create those. And there are some places still that nowadays don't necessarily have these standards, but it's important, right? And it's also important to keep in mind that being fair is very important. Like I said, especially when you're dealing with toxic employees, you don't want employees over here to be doing the same thing, but employees over here getting punished for the same behavior. Very difficult to try to tease out it and be sure you're treating everybody fairly. So number two, ensure that you've got these policies and standards. You know what they are. Ensure that there's a clear understanding of jobs and expectations. It's not only important to have them written down somewhere, but everyone has to have a clear expectation, right? Everyone has to know that. Get the basic information. They need to know who their customers are, who they're reporting to, what's expected, what's not. Everybody should know that starting out of the gate. Again, it comes in handy. We're going to talk about a couple of numbers down, why it's so important, right? Even when it comes down to performance reviews, standards and everything, everybody should know them. They should never come as a surprise. When you get ready to deal with a toxic employee, he or she should not be looking at you like, no one's ever said that to me before. No, because you make those standards and you make sure that everyone understands it, right? Then we roll on down to number three. You need to identify those subtle insults or subtle behaviors and insolence, right? Mumbling, when they're given instruction, or you say something to them and they're mumbling, or as you're talking they're rolling their eyes at you, right? Because that's insolence. That right there, what I just did, that's insolence. It can be very subtle, but that's insolence, right? Or when you're talking and they're deliberately facing away from you, you're over here and they're consistently just turning away from you, and they're checking and they're like, yeah, they haven't said anything disrespectful, but that behavior is disrespectful. Okay. Or some of them just flat out turn their back on you. When you're talking, they just turn their back on you, basically letting you know, I don't care what you say, I don't like it, whatever it is, I really don't care. Here's the thing: for any of you that have kids or you've dealt with kids before, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, we know that we can't fight every battle with a teenager. And so there's just things that you just ignore. You're like, I can't deal with this now. I'm gonna let it ride, ignore it, and keep going. You cannot do that in the workplace, right? You cannot do that in the workplace, but because it becomes a snowball, right? It becomes a snowball rolling downhill, and then when you turn around, it's like slam in the face. You've got a lot of work to do to clear that up. And so you can't just ignore those things in the workplace. Okay. So you do have to pay attention to employees, to their behaviors, to what they're saying, as well as what they're not saying, but communicating with their nonverbals and their actions, because you want to address it sooner rather than later, because we're going to go down to number 4. Disrespect is just like a rotten apple. It will destroy your working relationships with all of your direct reports. Not just the one or two employees who are being disrespectful, but it can ruin the entire workplace, right? Because number 4, toxic employees can be toxic to the entire workplace. So it's important to know how to handle it, how to call it out. And again, if you've done number 1, you set those policies and procedures, and you make sure that everyone understands it, it's a much better place to start. To start pointing out, here's what you're doing, here's what isn't tolerated, here's what you need to do to fix it, right? That's what we're talking about: managing or handling them effectively. It's a lot easier to start from there than if you have these disparate things going on. It's wrong over here, but not over here, kind of, sort of, maybe over there. Tough to deal with. Tough to deal with. Because if you've ever dealt with a toxic employee, you know that it is can be hard mentally and spiritually. It can be very hard on you, right? It can cause you, if you're not handling it, you don't know what to do, can really cause you to be on edge and really raise anxiety rates and raise the stress levels, right? Because nobody wants to be there, and all of a sudden you're just regretting, just really hating, contemplating going into your job if it goes too far. And I get that some of you are, you're assuming positions where the toxic employee has been that way for years, and they've just been this rolling snowball. When you get in the door, it's just right there about to hit you. I know it's not your making, the drama is not something that you created, but you are the one that has to deal with it, right? Because again, toxic employees are like time bombs, tick, 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 waiting for an opportunity for something to blow up, right? Blow up at anyone in the office, or even blow up at you, depending on how long they've been allowed to get away with this behavior, right? And I can hear my voice going. I'm on this as a medication, and it just makes me hoarse sometimes. So I will soldier on with number 5. Do understand what your company considers a toxic employee and how you're going to treat them, whether you are, a mid-level manager or whether you're at the top. What does your company consider to be a toxic employee, right? What is that? What kind of behavior is that? And then what do you have set up to deal with that behavior? And do all the team members know? Do all the leaders know? Do all the managers know? Does everyone know what that is? Because if not, again, you got to go back and maybe create, right? Or if it's there, kind of drag it up, because as it was explained to me many moons ago, new employees, when you're a new manager, you're a new leader, and you come on board, because you're reading everything new, so it's all new to you, so you just implement. Sometimes just that implementation is enough to make people angry, and if it's not corralled and handled, they become toxic employees. Not because you necessarily did anything wrong, just because you're ground one for anger. Well, everybody else said we could do it like this. Why are you changing? That can start it. Okay, which then rolls into number 6. Understand why they're toxic, right? Understand what is, try to get an understanding. It just also depends on really how insubordinate they're being and how disrespectful they're being, right? Um, but do try to get to the root cause of the behavior. And this really comes into knowing your people, right? And also understanding that root cause will really kind of point you to the best way to deal with them. Because sometimes stuff is beyond your control. Like I said, you talk about an employee that's been allowed to get away with murder, so to speak, before you got there. And now you're the one trying to corral this employee, you're trying to bring them back in the fold and get them on the right direction. You need to understand what has the last 5 years been, 10 years been. Have they just gotten like this in 1 month? Or have they been like this 10 years or 5 months or whatever? Because that goes into how effectively and what strategies you will need to use, right? And so it's a good thing, of course, you need the boundaries and all those things done. But sometimes you just need to take a step back and look at that big picture. All right. Sometimes toxic behavior isn't always intentional or impersonal, but sometimes it is. Right. And so it's you're trying to gather information and figure out where did this start to get a better understanding of the person, right? I told you about the soldier who walked into the door. He's like, I don't care who you are, you're female. I don't think females should be leaders. I don't even think they should be in the military. He actually said that. My wife was Navy, but I don't care. She shouldn't have been in the military either. You know, so that told me where he was coming from and how to deal with him, right? You know, do you have a or that's one instance of someone that you're dealing with because it points to how you're going to deal with that person. Or do you have someone who is like butt sore because they wanted your job and they didn't get it? That tells you something else about how to deal with that person. It tells you, right? Also, or is it someone who's having issues at the house and those issues are flowing into the workplace? That tells you how to deal with that person. Maybe they need a referral to EAP, or if it's gotten to a certain point, maybe they need a management referral to EAP. EAPs can be your best friend when you're in a leadership or management position and you have toxic employees, right? Because the EAP can you can tell them, hey, management referral, and they need to deal with insubordination to a supervisor, or they need to deal, and you can do that on a management referral to EAP, right? Your company's already paying for it, so why not use it to its fullest, right? And I'm saying EAP. So EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program. Companies that have them, they're already paid for, so they're free for the employee. Company already paid for it, but they can, right? Because some of you also know that I am a licensed clinician as well. So I've been on the other end with management referral EAPs. They're coming in for a host of different things to include insubordination or someone who can't show up to work on time. So we know, the employees, the supervisor knew there was something going on at the home, but they weren't going to delve into it. So they management referred them to the EAP and said, hey, person needs to fix this, or else we're going to have to start procedures to get rid of them. And so there is help. Don't feel like you got to do everything by yourself because there is help, right? Or, do you have a toxic employee because it's someone with a disability and part of their disability is a communication challenge, it's a communication issue, right? You have a lot of neurodiverse people. They're not necessarily toxic employees because they're doing it intentionally. They may be lost and don't have a clue, or it's their style of communication, right? Because I have social anxiety, and a lot of people have called me aloof, arrogant, conceited, and aloof. I'm none of those things. But, my disability makes it come off as if I am. So when you're talking about knowing your employees, this is why it's so important to know your direct reports, because you don't know until you figure this stuff out, right? It could be, is it someone is toxic because they're holdover from the last leadership administration? They're holdover. They're just gonna sit there and be a thorn in your side because they don't like the fact that someone had to go, whether they were pushed out or whatever, and so they decided to be a thorn in your side. It also informs you how you need to handle that person. Okay. Again, you really need to know your direct reports. When I'm coaching leaders, I help them build a focused action plan for every direct report. And we sit down and we go over this because we discover these things. Why are, I don't know what that is, but that's on the line. I'm going to get it out. I will admit, I had a banana split before I came down here. And I think I have some leftovers down here. So that's what I get for eating banana split before I do a live, right? But definitely, I do. I work with them because these are the things you need to tease out. And if you do this coming in and your employee starts to become toxic, you already have information on them where you can really start to talk with them and know them. Because oftentimes people just want to be treated fairly, equally, as an individual. And sometimes when you're the new kid on the block, whether you've got 10 years of management experience or 2 months of management experience, sometimes you're walking into a workplace that is challenging, and so you get what you got. But helping, building that focused action plan for each and every direct report puts you on the right path. You know who they are, you know what their dreams are, you know what their wishes are, you know what their strengths are, you know what their weaknesses are. And so when they start to veer off the track, you got things to work with to get them back on the track, right? And which leads to number 7: deal with the toxic behavior immediately. Because I was, again, brand new second lieutenant. I just want everybody to get along. I was like writing the king before he was writing the king. Can't we just all be nice and get along and all like each other? I don't want to make any waves. I don't want to be mean to anybody. Yeah, toxic behavior, deal with it immediately, right? And so I did. When that that specialist went off and cursed off one of my first line supervisors, it was like, I was like, man, I'm trying to be nice and he's doing this. I didn't have a choice. And again, I didn't like to, but I didn't have a choice. But I was like, oh no, you're getting written up for an Article 15, right? And so then then I was put in an awkward situation because my first sergeant couldn't stand the soldier. My first sergeant was like, yeah, I've been waiting to get at him. Yeah, man, let me tell you what we're gonna, let's stick it to him. Let's do this and do this and do this. Then which put me in an awkward position because number one, I really didn't care what my first sergeant did or didn't like. That wasn't the issue. My soldier needed to be punished for disrespecting my NCO and disrespecting me. I didn't care what my first sergeant said, right? And so I was in this awkward position of having to punish the soldier, but not nuke him like the first sergeant did because the first sergeant didn't like him. And so when I say that there's so many levels when you're managing and leading people, there's all kind of levels and office politics that you have to deal with, right? And I opted not to nuke that soldier. He did get an Article 15, and when he came back and realized that, oh shoot, you're a real lieutenant, you gonna punish me? He came back and I'm like, ma'am, I've been the best soldier and I won this many wars and I've never done this. And I was like, oh, but you disrespected my NCO and you disrespected me, you will be punished. And so he left out with his little crocodile tears in his eyes. But he came back about a year later and said, he thanked me. He said, you could have nuked me. You could have went to the floor with me and taken rank and taken money and everything, but you did not. He said, I had way more respect for you after that. And so it makes a difference in who you're dealing with and how you deal with them, right? And it's a strategy, but you got to deal immediately. And I did with him. I did. I was like, I thought to that afternoon, was like, nope, nope. And so for some folks, their immediate is different than my immediate. I know some folks as lieutenants would have just cursed the soldier out right then and there and did all that kind of stuff. That wasn't my nature. For folks that know me, and some people say that, I'm a hard butt and I learned to be that way. It's just not how I am by nature. And I'm an introvert and I have social anxiety, right? And I'm also an empath. So the intersectionality of those things, I just don't believe in jumping down people and it's not me, right? And that was also part of the reason I felt like a failure as a leader because I wasn't this person. I wasn't the extrovert and I wasn't there. But let me just say that you can be an introvert and be a quiet leader and be just as effective as an extrovert who is a loud leader. Everybody has their own leadership styles. You just have to find the one that works for you, right? And that's why a good coach, you need a good coach in your corner, right? Some folks are extroverts and they can put on a good show. But if you're an introvert, don't run around trying to put on a good show because you're trying to act like someone else who is a leader. Find your own thing and do what really helps you, right? So number 8 is pick a strategy to manage toxic employees. And I've already been talking about that because once you know them, you've already set the policies and everybody knows them. And when you get an employee that starts to go off the rail, or in this case, my employee just like jumped off completely and rolled down the side of the hill, but I was able to pick a strategy. I picked a strategy, right? It should always be in accordance with the policy, but your strategy may differ depending on who you're dealing with, right? I've had some folks that I pulled them in and talked to them before I did Article, I recommended Article 15. Lieutenants can't give Article 15, it has to be a company grade. For well, for those folks who don't know what I'm talking about, we're talking about military structure in the United States military. But I knew some folks I dealt with differently than I did others. But you still have to go in accordance with the policy, but there are levels. And so you need to be sure that when you're managing a toxic employee, is use a combination of strategies, right? Anybody that's ever studied behavioral health, we talk about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, two types of strategies. Okay, positive reinforcement is when you're rewarding folks for good performance or good behavior, and that's oftentimes like at the Birmingham VA hospital they used to do got caught doing something good, so people could report you for doing something really well. And my dad was like master this. He just loved customer service. And so someone was always reporting him for doing well. He was always getting $50 awards because he did well. Positive reinforcement. Not that he needed it, but certainly he still brags about it to this day about how many $50 awards he got because it's a nice way to encourage folks. Sometimes it works. With some people, it works. With some folks, you got to do that other one, that negative reinforcement. You got to yank something or you got to threaten to yank it before they behave. So it's all in understanding the person that you're dealing with, right? So positive reinforcement will only work for some people. That's just all they understand. It probably is based on their childhood, how they grew up. They don't necessarily quite understand positive reinforcement when they've gotten off the rail. But that's the thing about if you can catch the toxic behavior as it's going off the rails, see if you can use a positive reinforcement to get them back. But if they're like, my soldier just jumped off and rolled down the hill, negative reinforcement it was. Took away some time. It didn't take away money, but I did take away some times. So, talk with your HR and certainly see what your company does. It's just very important, right? And number 9, this is important if you're going to be successful, period.com. You must document every single interaction as if you'll have to stand in a court of law and justify what you did, why you did what you did. It's I've seen this many, many times, especially in several different at state level governments and at federal governments. People are holy terror in the office. They're just holy, they're toxic to the nth power. Why did they get away with it? Because no one wants to document. It's written. I mean, it's the federal government has all this stuff written out in the rules. It's there, it's codified. Nobody wants to take the time, and nobody, folks in leadership and management do not want to take the time to document. And that's why you have these people who are holy terrors and they've been in the same job for 5, 10, 15 years, making people miserable. I've seen an entire section leave except for the one toxic person. Nobody wanted to write him up, right? So if you just document what you see as you see it, and then when you get enough documentation, you don't have to like document so you throw a nuke ball and knock the person out of the water. But when they start going down that road, you can document enough, pull them in, and then issue, hey, here's what I'm observing, here's what you did, here's why it's against the standards, here's what you need to do to straighten up before they're 10 years in or before they run off all your great employees, right? You have to document and pretend to yourself that one day I may have to stand up in the court and justify why I did what I did. That's what you document. It's not like every single, like all day long, you're just chasing behind and documenting. But when you do document it as if you got to stand in the corner and justify why you did what you did. Keep a list of the documentation. If, especially if, when my soldier went off again, he went off in front of my platoon and several other platoons, so everybody knew. But yeah, you'll need to, in your organizations, write down who was there when the person did what they did, what have you, right? And keep a running file. Like I talked about before, those subtle behaviors, little subtle behaviors, insolence and ignoring and those kinds of things. No one else may see that, but document it, date and time, date and time. Here's the thing: if they're doing it with you, in all likelihood, they've done it with someone else. They just, no one else thought to document to catch that stuff, right? So do keep track of emails and meetings and any forms you give them, anything. If you have an employee that's starting to go off the tracks, it's okay to talk or have a phone call, right? But if they keep running, like picking up steam and rolling down that track and running off, put that stuff in writing. It's just so much easier on you to document. You may never need to use it. I've documented on folks, and just that first time of seeing me, like, yep, here's what we're doing, here's what I see, this is what you need to straighten out. That was enough to get them back on the right track. Because they're like, oh shoot, you're gonna keep this is deep. I don't want this. I don't need this on my record. For some folks that works. Other folks, do that positive, that negative reinforcement, right? Number 10, make sure that you don't get so caught up with the negative employee that you ignore all the great employees that you have who come into that job and they do their work every day like they're supposed to. Don't allow negativity to affect your morale, and certainly not the morale of your organization, right? Definitely don't get so caught up that you ignore the people who are doing great and wondrous things. That is so important. And then I have a bonus here. I said 10 things, but I'm going to give you 11. Make sure that you, as a leader or the manager, make sure you get coaching and the professional care that you need. Dealing with toxic employees, especially, sometimes it just takes one, whether it's one, two, or five, or 10, it can be absolutely exhausting. It's mentally exhausting, it's physically exhausting, and it can start to tug on your morale if you let it, right? And this is especially important if you're taking over drama from a previous leadership administration, and that snowball has been rolling down the hill for 5, 6, 7 years. Do get help and assistance, right? Because, yes, it's drama that's been there since 5 years, but all of a sudden you're the one who's supposed to fix it, right? Don't feel like you got to have all of the answers, and don't feel like you got to do all the work by yourself in isolation. Definitely have a mentor, definitely talk to your sponsor, definitely speak with your coach, right? And if it's keeping you up at night and you're like, sipping that wine, it went from a glass each night to a bottle each night, then you may need to go see your primary care doctor or get therapy from a therapist. But you don't have to handle all of this alone, right? You do have to take care of yourself, because some people will, they I was in a workplace that said, oh, we just all talk to each other, band together, and we just all decide we're not going to do what the new person wants because you'll get tired before we do. So it happens. So you need to be sure that you're taking care of yourself as a leader, so that you don't let it drag you down. Because managing toxic employees is a challenge, but it can be done effectively, right? With the proper management practices and policies in place, right? So if you are listening to this, and congratulations and thank you for staying to the end. This is a longer one than I thought, right? But that's okay. If you would like a PDF transcript of this live, drop tips in the comments and I'll send you the PDF, and give you all the information, so you can listen to this over and over again, certainly if you want to. But if you're like me, I like to have things to read and go over it and pull out the tidbits and highlight the stuff that really resonated with me. So be sure to drop tips in the comments and I will get you a copy. If you watch this on the replay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Drop replay, and you too can drop tips in the comments, right? And for those of you who hung in there to the end on the live today, thank you, thank you, thank you. Much appreciation for that. So be back here this same time next week. Well, a little early, I'm at the end now. But I'll be talking about what is the biggest issue mid career women face next week. Take care, everybody.